If you saw the impossible right before your eyes, would you believe it to be a blessing from the heavens or an abhorrent anomaly of nature? Well, maybe it can be both, as our main character discovers firsthand when dealing with strange happenings at an even stranger facility. Will she be able to figure out what exactly is going on around her, and even inside her for that matter, before it's too late? Well, let's see if we can stop this so-called miracle as we learn how to beat Immaculate. Our story begins with a nun praying to a picture of Mother Mary. She slides it back into place after leaving a message of some kind behind it and sneaks into the room of the Mother Superior, the head of the convent she's located at. As the woman sleeps, the nun swipes the keys for the main gate and rushes to make her escape. She can't quite get the thing open though, only able to unlock the gate itself but not the chains that bind, and other sisters are quickly approaching to apprehend her. She's able to just barely slip through a gap created, but is unfortunately grabbed by her leg, and even more unfortunately has it against the bars. Ouchies. Guess they were having none of that. The girl passes out from the pain only to wake up and find herself trapped in a wooden box, also known as a coffin. She cries for help, but her prayers go unanswered as the screen fades to black. Well, we know right off the rip that something isn't quite right with this place, but it seems people on the outside are unaware of this, including our main character Cecilia, who is traveling to said convent to take her vows and become a full-fledged sister there. Let's hope she has a better experience than that last person. She meets with a deacon at the airport who takes her to the location. It's way past the outskirts of town, isolated in the countryside. Nice and far away from civilization and any help that may provide. As she arrives and is given the tour by another nun, Sister Isabel, we learn that the location is called Lady of Sorrows. It's a refuge built on top of an ancient catacomb that acts as a hospice for nuns before their trip to heaven. Cecilia and other members of the staff are there to comfort and take care of the women in their final days. Isabel warns the new recruit that this is serious and strict business, not for the faint of heart. It's a lot of hard work to keep up with demands, and a lot of emotional stress to see people fade away. So Cecilia better be certain she wants to commit to this before joining. But the woman's belief that God has sufficiently prepared her for what's to come keeps her determined to stay. I like the confidence, but if someone's giving you a way out, you might want to at least consider it a bit before quickly dedicating your entire life to something. Let's hope her faith is not misplaced. As she goes to her inauguration ceremony, she meets up with Father Tedeschi, who is the man that invited her here in the first place. Apparently, he has a knack for finding lost souls and helping them commit to religion at this location, and it's no different with Cecilia. We learn that after surviving an incident where she fell into a frozen lake and nearly died, Cecilia believed God saved her for a purpose, and her searching for that purpose has led her here. Not sure why she wouldn't want to become a paramedic or something after that instead though, since those are the people who saved her directly. But sure, thank God and go live out in the countryside. That works too. As Cecilia steps away to use the restroom, she hears prayers through a tearful voice and goes to investigate. Doing so leads her to a masked nun lying face down on the floor, which is never fully explained to us, as the Reverend Mother shows up as well. Changing the subject, the woman excitedly shows Cecilia a sacred artifact they have in a display case nearby. A crooked piece of metal brought back from Jerusalem, believed to be one of the nails used to attach Jesus Christ to the cross. As she explains that Jesus' sacrifice exemplifies that suffering equals love, Cecilia gets dizzy and passes out. After a bizarre nightmare, she wakes up in her bed, believing she must have just indulged in a bit too much wine at the party last night. Yeah, I don't know about that, considering how sober she appeared and spoke just moments before her collapse. We now get a montage of the next few days as Cecilia makes friends with a sister named Gwen, and they all learn the ways of the convent and what will be required of them during their stay here. Lots of chores, helping the sick, and even preparing their own food from scratch. And when I say from scratch, I mean it, as they even have to kill and defeather their own chickens if they want to eat. Everything seems good and normal enough, except for the strange side-eye Isabel occasionally shoots Cecilia, almost as if she knows something about the girl that the others do not. Nothing else weird happens until a few nights later when one of the delusional patients sneaks into Cecilia's room and cuts a lock of her hair while she's trying to sleep. That's odd, but nothing unexpected from a patient in her mental state. No, what really sticks out as unusual is after Cecilia returns the woman to her bed, where she notices a cross scar is branded onto the bottom of each of her feet. The next morning, while hanging out in the company of her friend Gwen, Cecilia suddenly gets sick to her stomach. It's severe and strange enough to go see the on-site doctor, who runs a few tests. Once they have the results, they bring her into a private meeting with the doctor and higher-ups at the convent, where they strictly demand to know if the girl has broken any of her sacred vows made upon arrival. Specifically, they demand to know if she has ever been intimate with a man. After swearing multiple times that she is still a virgin, they deliver the shocking news that the test results have revealed: Cecilia is pregnant. They use an ultrasound machine and confirm there is in fact a life growing inside her, despite her lack of intercourse. Everyone is super excited about this, claiming to be a miracle, a child being conceived without sin being committed. But Cecilia is just scared and confused, understandably, unsure of how this could happen or why God would have chosen her of all people. This leads to some really awkward ceremonies where everyone is joyously celebrating Cecilia as the woman just stands there in tearful disbelief of the situation. In fact, let's take this opportunity to review everything so far. For the nun in the opening scene, she should have stayed more stealthy. Maybe there was a reason she couldn't, but we never saw that. Point is, we need to take our time and escape right, doing our best Solid Snake impression to ensure we get out undetected. If we're spotted, however, we should have a plan B or some sort of weapon to help defend ourselves, instead of putting all the eggs in the gate-opening base kit. We should know the layout well enough to be aware of any back exits or alternate routes out of the facility that we can make our way to if the gate's a bust. And we should be armed with anything we could find. Those sharp knives used on the chickens, for example, would be a great start. As for Cecilia, can't exactly blame her for not realizing the place isn't as innocent as it seems. But once she passed out, she should have definitely gone to a hospital to get checked out. A few glasses of wine wouldn't cause that, and if it did, that's all the more reason to see a healthcare professional about it. There could be a serious issue going on with our circulatory system or our brains. Serious stuff we don't want to just ignore and hope goes away, or blame on something unreasonable like a small amount of alcohol. Had she done this, she might have discovered the life growing inside her sooner, and may have been able to get help from the outside world when it comes to dealing with it. An issue we will see come up eventually in the film. Lastly, she should go to a hospital anyway once she learns she's preggers. That's clearly not normal, as the staff there point out, and could use a second opinion to confirm, despite the ultrasound proof we witness. As we will soon learn though, the staff here don't want Cecilia to seek out proper medical attention elsewhere, which is a huge red flag. One that we could have been warned about sooner if we had bothered to attempt to get proper help in the first place. We fast forward a while and Cecilia is now in her second trimester. While dealing with her usual morning sickness, she happens to cough up a tooth in the process. Well, that's not normal. Quite concerning. But on the bright side, we see that she's treated like royalty around the convent, with sisters standing in respect for her whenever she enters a room. She's also no longer required to do any work, with her only job being to relax and protect the offspring inside. And Cecilia does this by going to the communal bath. However, she might find it harder than she thought to protect the little one growing inside, as someone else soon enters the room. It's Isabel, who is in a distraught and bitter rage, jealous that she wasn't the chosen one herself. She takes this rage out on Cecilia as she attempts to the woman in the tub, but thankfully is stopped by a few other nuns soon after. They check on the unborn child soon after, confirming it's still doing fine inside, but Cecilia finally voices that she herself isn't doing so fine, as she tells them about the tooth she threw up and other abnormalities she's been experiencing. Because of this, she wants to see another doctor and at an actual hospital for a second opinion and additional treatment. A fair request, but one that's denied by the father and doctor on staff, as they explain how easy it can be to get sick at a medical facility, which, to be fair, is unfortunately true. They also state they don't want word of this miracle getting out just yet. Not sure why that would be, but Cecilia reluctantly agrees, for now at least. Later that evening, Isabel is seen plummeting from the rooftop, apparently her own life. But with how the deacon earlier reassured Cecilia that the violent woman would never bother her again, I have my doubts foul play wasn't involved to ensure this. And I'm not the only one with doubts apparently, as her friend Gwen has finally had enough and voices her opinion to everyone there. She shouts how they can't trust what's growing inside Cecilia and how it makes no sense they won't send her to a hospital, or for Isabel to just suddenly end it all. Something is clearly going on here, and people are clearly lying to them. Before she can continue any further though, she is silenced by Father Tedeschi and Deacon Enzo, who drag her away kicking and screaming to put a stop to the naysay. With Cecilia just sort of standing there watching in awe, not going to do anything to help your friend, even when she was speaking up for you. That's cold. Later that night, the painting in Cecilia's room falls off its hinges slightly, and she discovers the message left by the previous occupant we saw at the beginning of the film. It's a Bible quote that mentions how Satan himself disguises himself as an angel of light. Ominous, but not directly helpful at telling us about anything going on. You'd think her secret message would have been more directly useful. This does bother Cecilia enough though that she wants to share it with Gwen, but unfortunately her friend is missing from her room that night. Of course she is though. Remember how you just stood there and did nothing as she got dragged off? Well, since she's having doubts about this place and is already out and about, Cecilia takes this opportunity to snoop around a bit and reads up on the file they have on her. There's a newspaper article relating to the ice incident that almost ended her life, as well as a document depicting various chromosomes of hers. Seems they've been doing their homework on Cecilia long before she ever visited the convent. Her research is interrupted by cries of help, so she goes to investigate the noise, peeking through the cracks of the wooden door where she hears it coming from. There, she's frozen in fear by the sheer horror of what she sees. It's Gwen, strapped to a chair and being punished for her crimes of speaking up by having her tongue. That's just plain awful, but at least it confirms to Cecilia once and for all that she does in fact need to get out of this place. The following morning, staff members are awoken by the pained screams of Cecilia and rush to her room to find her lower abdomen coated in crimson liquid. Even the Reverend Mother wants to send the poor girl to a hospital at this point, but Father Tedeschi still refuses, shouting for her to withhold the call for an ambulance. Thankfully, though, he finally caves and gives in to the request for medical attention when he sees the state that she's in. All it took was her to be on the verge of apparently. They carry her to a car and begin the long drive into town. And it's unfortunate the drive is so long as it doesn't allow for Cecilia to make it very far before her plan is figured out. Back in her room, we see the revered mother crying over the red-stained sheets when she happens to notice a loose feather on the ground. This causes her to look under the bed where she sees the rest of the feathers, attached to a chicken in a pillowcase. Yep, that wasn't just the manufacturers royally screwing up when stuffing feathers in the pillow. Cecilia faked her pregnancy complications with some decent acting and poultry product. But now that the staff know, all it takes is one phone call for the deacon and father to know as well, and they stop the car. Realizing the jig is up, Cecilia makes a run for it through the fields, but is soon caught and dragged back by the two men. After returning her to the facility, the father has Cecilia strapped to a wheelchair and finally shares a bit about what's been going on. He explains how that artifact they have, that Jesus nail, had slight traces of DNA evidence on it. And despite it being over 2,000 years old, they were able to harness that evidence and form genetic material to create a clone of Christ. All they needed was the proper vessel to develop the child. They don't explain how or when they planted this material in Cecilia, but my guess is they drugged her wine during the ceremony and injected her while she was unconscious. Of course, science isn't always an exact science, and things don't always go according to plan. That's why she's been experiencing some health complications. Cecilia isn't the first host they've attempted this with either, as he takes her past several failed attempts in specimen jars they've gathered over the past 20 years. But he's sure that this time will be different and a success. Cecilia objects to this science fair project though, go figure, and refuses to go along with mothering the second coming of Jesus. So Tedeschi stops being friendly and both her feet with a burning cross to remind her not to stray from her path ever again. Well, that explains the scars we saw on the woman earlier at least. Cecilia really should have been more assertive and voiced her concerns sooner, demanding they take a woman with an immaculate conception to a hospital. The fact that this is such an unbelievable and mysterious event is all the more reason to get checked out by multiple medical sources, instead of hiding it from the rest of the world. Of course, we now know that they weren't letting her go since she is actually more of a lab rat to them than a true miracle, but this would at least let her know that sooner, and possibly without having to learn the hard way by seeing a friend get and having her feet burned. Speaking of Gwen, Cecilia really should have spoken up for her sooner. They likely would have listened to the Holy One that has been chosen by God in their eyes, and obeyed if she had requested they leave Gwen alone. This goes for when her friend was speaking out on her behalf in the first place, but double for when she witnessed Gwen getting her tongue out. I guess she was scared and didn't want to get involved in the torture herself, but I would hedge my bets that they wouldn't want to harm the vessel of the unborn miracle child. Unfortunately, as we see with the foot burning, they are still willing to hurt that vessel. But we didn't know that at the time, and they only did that because she tried to escape. It might be different if she was just trying to save a friend and fellow sister. The plan with the chicken was very clever, but also half-baked. There should have been more effort into hiding the evidence of our actions instead of just leaving the chicken in a fairly exposed location. We also should always have a plan B, as stated before, and taken a weapon with us concealed on our person. Ideally, the knife that was on the bird itself. If we had, once they start to suss out what we did via the phone call, we can just take them out with a swift strike to their necks while we're in the back seat still. They likely wouldn't expect an attack from a supposedly in pain and dying pregnant woman. But hey, if she did that, the movie would be over, and we can't have that just yet. So instead, Cecilia has lived out her next few weeks as a prisoner at the convent. She's in her third trimester now, and her health is still worsening as some of her fingernails are falling out. Cecilia talks to the cardinal in a confession booth, seeking answers for their actions, which they justify by claiming if they weren't meant to do these things, God would have stopped them by now. Amazing and delusional logic as always. We see the unnatural pregnancy has unnatural results, as Cecilia's belly pulses and ungulates in bizarre ways from the hell spawn within. And I'm not sure if this was the final breaking point for her to finally do something, or if this was just the first opportunity that presented itself. But either way, Cecilia fights back. While left alone with the revered mother, she picks up a heavy metal cross and burns the old hag's face to a pulp. Well, God didn't stop her, so I guess she was meant to do that. Immediately after this, though, her water breaks. Great timing. This doesn't deter Cecilia from exacting her wrath, though, as she next uses a set of rosary beads to strike the cardinal, snatching the man's lighter and heading to the underground laboratory with it. Once there, she pours out a flammable fluid all over the place and is about to torch it and herself before Father Tedeschi interrupts her. After a bit of a struggle, she makes her way to the door and locks the man inside. He tries to wrestle with her through the gaps in the bars, but she's able to ignite the place, ending this nightmare as he and his freaky experiments go up in smoke. Or so it would seem, but unfortunately, Tedeschi believes in lab safety and uses a nearby fire extinguisher to prevent a full meltdown. Didn't fully prevent half his face and body from being charred to a crisp, however, and the man exits the room in a rage as Cecilia makes her escape down through the forbidden catacombs, foreshadowed long ago. After wandering the maze of tunnels for a while, she finds the bodies of the non-believers are stored down here, including that of her friend Gwen. Rest in peace. But she also eventually stumbles upon a small gap, leading to the outside. She attempts to crawl her way through it, but is soon dragged back by the creepy, crispy father. Tedeschi brandishes a scalpel and attempts to give Cecilia an impromptu cesarean on the spot, but she came prepared this time and actually brought a weapon of her own. She reveals the Jesus spike and the father with it in the neck, ending him for good this time. Bloodied and beaten, Cecilia makes it to the outside world, and once there, unleashes a primal scream as she gives birth to her little Jesus Jr. We don't get to see the little bundle of joy, but we hear it already snarling and growling as it hits the dirt. The Virgin Mother wastes no time in cutting the cord before picking a decent-sized stone nearby and hands the newfound paperweight to her offspring with force. That's some motherly love right there. Could things have gone any differently though? Well, I'm not sure why Cecilia waited until her water broke to finally decide to break out of there herself. Maybe she was terrified of attempting this after her last plan didn't work, not wanting to risk the consequences of more torture, and it took the realization that it's now or never for her to get her plan into gear, or we could give her the benefit of the doubt and assume there wasn't a better opportunity until now. Either way, we should be biding our time and formulating plans for escape while we stay there, and try not to wait until the last minute to enact those ideas if possible. Burning the place was brilliant, as it not only helps us escape, but prevents future women from possibly dealing with this same horror as well. I would just make sure safety measures, such as extinguishers and sprinkler systems, are disabled before attempting this. Easier said than done, especially when caught in the act, but still something to think about. She did good ending the father, but if anything, could have attempted this attack sooner, like when he first left the lab in his freshly burned state. But I understand prioritizing escape and avoiding a fight when possible for safety. She also did a good job with her newborn, but who knows? Maybe she could have raised it into something resembling a decent human being. Of course, I understand not wanting to take that risk or be reminded of the entire horrible ordeal every time she looks at it, so can't blame her for making the choice she did. Remember to keep your faith, everyone, in whatever that may be for you. Just don't use it as an excuse for your actions or let it control your life, especially to the detriment of ourselves and those around us. And with that said, thanks for watching as always, my friends. Take care and binge another one.